Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Reader's Nook. I am Lady Rain, and we are going to hopefully finish The Monkey today. Yeah, everything that like the last 11 minutes or so will be actually deleted when I throw it up for everybody to hear later. And then, of course, I do put this on YouTube under the Reader's Nook. I have to adjust a few more, but I am adjusting the headings over there. I had these really long headings, like the name of the video, and I got some advice, some suggestions from one of the viewers, and her suggestion worked. So that's what we're going to follow. We're going to go with her suggestion, and that means if she likes it, I'm sure everybody else will too. So, yeah. All right. We left off with moving from California, changing dentists. Okay. So, we are, let's see. It was too easy to say that the move from California had changed Dennis, or that. Now we're talking about Hal. His thoughts froze. The monkey. The monkey was sitting on the windowsill, cymbals poised. Hal felt his heart stop dead in his chest, and then suddenly began to gallop. His vision wavered, and his throbbing head began to ache ferociously. Okay, and that's where we stopped. It had escaped from the suitcase, and now stood on the windowsill, grinning at him. Thought you got rid of me, didn't you? And you've thought that before, haven't you? Yes, he said sickly, yes, I have. Pete, did you take the monkey out of the suitcase? He asked, knowing the answer already. He had locked the suitcase and put the key in his overcoat pocket. Petey glanced at the monkey, and something, Hal thought it was unease, passed over his face. No, he said. Mom put it there. Mom did? Yeah, she took it from you. She laughed. Took it from me? What are you talking about? You had it in bed with you. I was brushing my teeth, but Dennis saw. He laughed too. He said you looked like a baby with a teddy bear. He looked at the monkey. His mouth was dry, too dry to swallow. He had it in bed with him? In bed. That loathsome fur against his cheek, maybe against his mouth. Those glaring eyes staring into his sleeping face. Those grinning teeth near his neck. On his neck. Dear God! He turned abruptly and went to the closet. The Samsonite was there, still locked. The key was still in his overcoat pocket. Behind him, the TV snapped off. He came out of the closet slowly. Peter was looking at him soberly. Daddy, I don't like that monkey, he said, his voice almost too low to hear. Nor do I, Hal said. Petey looked at him closely to see if he was joking and saw that he was not. He came to his father and hugged him tight. He could feel him trembling. Petey spoke into his ear then, very rapidly, as if afraid he might not have courage enough to say it again, or that the monkey might overhear. It's like it looks at you. It looks at you no matter where you are in the room, and if you go into another room, it's like it's looking through the wall at you. I kept feeling like it wanted me for something. Petey shuddered. Hal held him tight. Like it wanted you to wind it up, Hal said. Petey nodded violently. It isn't really broken, is it, Dad? Sometimes it is, Hal said, looking over his son's shoulder at the monkey. But sometimes it still works. I kept wanting to go over there and wind it up. It was so quiet, and I thought, I can't. It'll wake me, Daddy. But I still wanted to, and I went over and I touched it. And I hate the way it feels, but I liked it too. And it was like it was saying, wind me up, Petey, we'll play. Your father isn't going to wake up. He's never going to wake up at all. Wind me up, wind me up. The boy suddenly burst into tears. It's bad, I know it is. There's something wrong with it. Can't we throw it out, Daddy? Please? The monkey grinned its endless grin at Hal. He could feel Petey's tears between them. Late morning sun glinted off the monkey's brass cymbals. The light reflected upward and put sunstreaks on the motel's plain white stucco ceiling. What time did your mother think she and Dennis would be back, Petey? Around 1. He swiped at his red eyes with his shirt sleeve, looking embarrassed at his tears. But he couldn't look at the monkey. I turned on the TV, Daddy, he whispered. And I turned it up loud. That's all right, Petey. How would it have happened, Hal wondered. Heart attack? An embolism like my mother? What? It doesn't really matter, does it? On the heels of that, a colder thought. Get rid of it, he says. Throw it out. But can it be gotten rid of? Ever? The monkey grinned mockingly at him, its cymbals held a foot apart. Did it suddenly come to life on the night Aunt Ida died? He wondered suddenly. Was it the last sound she heard? The muffled jang, jang, jang of the monkey beating its cymbals together in the black attic while the wind whistled along the drain pipe? Maybe not so crazy, Hal said slowly to his son. Go get your flight bag, Petey. Petey looked at him uncertainly. Where are we going to? What are we going to do? Maybe it can be got rid of. Maybe permanently. Maybe just for a while. A long while or a short while. Maybe it's just going to come back, and that's all it's about. But maybe we, can say goodbye to it for a long time. It took 20 years to come back this time. It took 20 years to get out of the well. We're going to go for a ride, Hal said. Hal felt fairly calm, but somehow too heavy inside his skin. Even his eyeballs seemed to have gained weight. But first I want you to take your flight bag out there by the edge of the parking lot and find 3 or 4 good-sized rocks. Put them inside the bag and bring it back to me. Got it? Understanding flickered in Petey's eyes. All right, Daddy. Hal glanced at his watch. It was 12:15. Hurry, I want to be gone before your mother gets back. Where are we going? To Uncle Will's and Aunt Ida's, he said. To the home place. Hal went to the bathroom, looked behind the toilet, and got the bowl brush leaning there. He took it back to the window and stood there with it in his hand, like a cut-rate magic wand. He looked out at Petey in his Melton shirt jacket, crossing the parking lot with his flight bag. Delta showing clearly in white letters against the blue field. A fly bumbled in the upper corner of the window. Slow and stupid at the end of the warm season, Hal knew how it felt. He watched Petey hunt up 3 good-sized rocks and then start back across the parking lot. A car came around the corner of the motel. The car that was moving too fast, much too fast, and without thinking, reaching with a kind of relaxed, the kind of reflex a good shortstop shows going to his right. The hand holding the brush flashed down as if in a karate chop and stopped. The cymbals closed soundlessly on his intervening hand, and he felt something in the air, something like rage. The car's brakes screamed. Petey flinched back. The driver motioned to him impatiently, as if what had almost happened was Petey's fault, and Petey ran across the parking lot with his collar flapping and into the motel's rear entrance. Sweat was running down Hal's chest. He felt it on his forehead like a drizzle of oily rain. The cymbals pressed coldly against his hand, numbing it. Go on, he said grimly. Go on. I can wait all day, until hell freezes over if that's what it takes. The cymbals drew apart and came to rest. Hal heard one faint click from inside the monkey. He withdrew the brush and looked at it. Some of the white bristles had blackened, as if singed. The fly bumbled and buzzed, trying to find the cold October sunshine that seemed so close. Petey came bursting in, breathing quickly, cheeks rosy. I got 3 good ones, Dad. he broke off. Are you all right, Daddy? Fine, he said, bringing the bag over. Hal hooked the table by the sofa over to the window with his foot, so it stood below the windowsill, and put the flight bag on it. He spread its mouth open like lips. He could see the stones Petey had collected glimmering inside. He used the toilet bowl brush to hook the monkey forward. It teetered for a moment and then fell into the bag. There was a faint jing as one of the cymbals struck one of the rocks. Dad? Daddy? Petey sounded frightened. Hal looked around at him. Something was different. Something had changed. What was it? Then he saw the direction of Petey's gaze, and he knew the buzzing of the fly had stopped. It lay dead on the windowsill. Did the monkey do that? Petey whispered. Come on, Hal said, zipping the bag shut. I'll tell you while we ride out to the home place. How can we go? Mom and Dennis took the car. Don't worry, Hal said, and ruffled Petey's hair. He showed the desk clerk his driver's license and a $20 bill. After taking Hal's Texas Instruments digital watch as collateral, the clerk handed Hal the keys to his own car, a battered AMC Gremlin. As they drove east on Route 302 towards Casco, Hal began to talk, hastily at first and then a little faster. He began by telling Petey that his father had probably brought the monkey home with him from overseas as a gift for his sons. It wasn't a particularly unique toy. There was nothing strange or valuable about it. There must have been hundreds of thousands of wind-up monkeys in the world. Some made in Hong Kong, some in Taiwan, some in Korea. But somehow along the line, perhaps in the dark back closet of a house in Connecticut, where the two boys had begun their growing up, something had happened to the monkey. Something bad. It might be, Hal said, as he tried to coax the clerk's drumlin up the past 40, that some bad things, maybe even most bad things, weren't even really awake and aware of what they were. He left it there because that was probably as much as Petey could understand. But his mind continued on its own course. He thought about most evil might be very much like the monkey, full of clockwork that might wind up. The clockwork turns, the cymbals begin to beat, the teeth grin, and the stupid glass eyes laugh, or appear to laugh. He told Petey about finding the monkey, but little more. He did not want to terrify his already scared boy any more than he had already. The story thus became disjointed, not really clear, but Petey asked no questions. Perhaps he was filling in the blanks for himself. Hal thought, in much the same way that he had dreamed his mother's death over and over, although he had not been there. Uncle Will and Aunt Ida had both been there for the funeral. Afterward, Uncle Will had gone back to Maine. It was harvest time, and Aunt Ida had stayed on for about 2 weeks with the boys to neaten up her sister's affairs before bringing them back to Maine. But more than that, she spent the time making herself known to them. They were so stunned by their mother's sudden death that they were nearly comatose. When they couldn't sleep, she was there with warm milk. When Hal woke at 3 a.m. with nightmares in which his mother approached the water cooler without seeing the monkey that floated and bobbed in its cool sapphire depths, grinning and clapping its cymbals, each converging pair of sweeps, leaving trails of bubbles behind. She was there when Bill came down with first a fever, and then a rash of painful mouth sores, and then hives 3 days after the funeral. She was there. She made herself known to the boys, and before they rode the bus from Hartford to Portland with her, both Bill and Hal had come to her separately and wept on her lap while she held them and rocked them, and the bonding began. The day before they left Connecticut for good to go down Maine, as it was called in those days, the rag man came in his old ratty truck and picked up the huge pile of useless stuff that Bill and Hal had carried out to the sidewalk from the back closet. When all the junk had been set out by the curb for pickup, Aunt Ida had asked them to go through the back closet again and pick out any souvenirs or remembrances they wanted specially to keep. "We just don't have room for it all, boys," she told them. And Hal supposed Bill had taken her at her word and had gone through all those fascinating boxes their father had left behind one final time. Hal did not join his older brother. Hal had lost his taste for the back closet. A terrible idea had come to him during the first 2 weeks of mourning. Perhaps his father hadn't just disappeared or run away because he had an itchy foot and had discovered marriage wasn't for him. Maybe the monkey had gotten him. When he heard the ragman's truck roaring and farting and backfiring its way down the block, Hal nerved himself, snatched the monkey from his shelf where it had been since the day his mother died. He had not dared to touch it until then, not even to throw it back into the closet, and ran downstairs with it. Neither Bill nor Aunt Ida saw him. Sitting on top of the barrel filled with broken souvenirs and moldy books with the Ralston Purina carton filled with similar junk, Hal had slammed the monkey back into the box with it had originally came out of, hysterically daring it to begin clapping its cymbals. Go on, I dare you. Dare you, double dare you. But the monkey only waited there, leaning back nonchalantly as if expecting a bus, grinning its awful, knowing grin. Hal stood by, a small boy in old corduroy pants and scuffed Buster Browns, as the ragman, an Italian gent who wore a crucifix and whistled through the space in his teeth, began loading boxes and barrels into an ancient truck with wooden stake sides. Hal watched as he lifted both the barrel and the Ralston Purina box balanced atop it. He watched the monkey disappear into the bed of the truck. He watched as the ragman climbed back into his cab, blew his nose mightily into the palm of his hand, wiped his hand with a huge red handkerchief, and started the truck's engine with a roar. Why not just blow your nose in the handkerchief? And a blast of oily blue smoke. He watched the truck draw away, and a great weight had dropped away from his heart. He actually felt it go. He had jumped up and down twice, as high as he could jump, his arms spread, palms held out, and if any of the neighbors had seen him, they would have thought it odd, almost to the point of blasphemy, perhaps. Why is that boy jumping for joy? Dry throat. A jump for joy. Oh, why was the boy jumping for joy? For it was surely what it was. A jump for joy could hardly be disguised. They surely would have asked themselves, with his mother not even a month in her grave. Okay, now I'm getting upset. I don't want to cough. He was doing it because the monkey was gone forever, or so he had thought. Not 3 months later, Aunt Ida had sent him up into the attic to get the boxes of Christmas decorations, and as he crawled around looking at them, getting the knees of his pants dusty, he had suddenly came face to face with it again. And his wonder and terror had been so great that he had to bite sharply into the side of his hand to keep from screaming or fainting dead away. There it was, grinning its toothy grin, cymbals poised a foot apart and ready to clap. Leaning nonchalantly back against one corner of the Ralston Purina carton, as if waiting for a bus, seeming to say, "Thought you got rid of me, didn't you? But I'm not that easy to get rid of, Hal. I like you. Hal? We were made for each other. Just a boy and his pet monkey. A couple of good old buddies. Somewhere south of here, there's a stupid old Italian ragman lying in a clawfoot tub with his eyeballs bulging and his dentures half popped out of his mouth. His screaming mouth a ragman who smells like a burned out, exiled battery. He was saving me for his grandson, Hal. He put me on the bathroom shelf with his soap and his razor and his Burma shave. And the Philco radio he listened to the Brooklyn Dodgers on, and I started to clap. And one of my cymbals hit that old radio, and into the tub it went. And then I came to you, Hal. I worked my way along the country roads at night. And the moonlight shone off my teeth at 3 a.m, and I left many dead. I left many people dead at many scenes. I apologize. I came to you, Hal. I'm your Christmas present, so wind me up. Who's dead? Is it Bill? Is it Uncle Will? Is it you, Hal? Is it you? Hal had backed away, grimacing madly, eyes rolling, and nearly fell down, going downstairs. This is going to drive me nuts, honestly. I don't even know why I'm coughing. Probably my nose. I apologize. He told Aunt Ida he hadn't been able to find the Christmas decorations. I just got a text. Y'all are going to love this. My oldest wrote me. She has wavy hair. And it was like me when I was younger. It was like Shirley Temple, really curly. She's going to straighten her hair. I've never seen her hair straightened. Never. It's going to be fun. Oh, let's try this again. It was the first lie he had ever told her. And she had seen the lie. What is in the... I think I have dog hair. I did. I have a piece of dog hair. Our Pomsky's shedding. Everywhere. Every day we sweep, we get a new puppy. Because he's got that much fur. Yeah, it's a lot. Winter's coming up. I don't know why he's shedding. He should be growing hair. Anyway, it was the first lie he had ever told her, and she had seen the lie on his face, but had not asked him why he had told it, thank God. And later when Bill came in, she asked him to look, and he brought the Christmas decorations down. Later when they were alone, Bill hissed at him that he was a dummy who couldn't find his own ass with both hands and a flashlight. Hal said nothing. Hal was pale and silent, only picking at his supper. And that night he dreamed of the monkey again, one of the cymbals striking the Philco radio as it babbled out Dean Martin singing, "When a due moon hit you eye like a big pizza pie at Samore." Yeah. The radio tumbling into the bathtub as the monkey grinned and beat its cymbals together with a jang and a jang and a jang. Only it wasn't the Italian ragman who was in the tub when the water turned electric. It was him. Hal and his son scrambled down the embankment behind the home place to the boathouse that jutted out over the water on its old pilings. He had the flight bag in his right hand. His throat was dry. His ears were attuned to an unnaturally keen pitch. The bag was very heavy. Hal set down the flight bag. "Don't touch that," he said. Hal felt his pocket for the ring of keys Bill had given him and found one neatly labeled B House as a scrap of adhesive tape. The day was clear and cold, windy, the sky a brilliant blue. The leaves of the trees that crowded up the verge of the lake had gone very bright fall shade from blood red to school bus yellow. They talked in the wind. Leaves swirled around Petey's sneakers as he stood anxiously by, and Hal could smell November just downwind, with winter crowding close behind it. The key turned in the padlock, and he pulled the swing doors open. Memory was strong. He didn't even have to look to kick down the wooden block that held the doors open. The smell in here was all summer. Canvas, bright wood, a lingering, lusty warmth. Uncle Will's rowboat was still there, the oars neatly shipped as if he had last loaded it with his fishing tackle and 2 6-packs of Black Label yesterday afternoon. Bill and Hal had both gone out fishing with Uncle Will many times, but never together. Uncle Will maintained the boat was too small for 3, but the red rim Uncle Will had touched up each spring, or the red trim, was now faded and peeling, though, and the spiders had spun silk in the boat's bow. Bow? I think it's bow. Hal laid hold of the boat and pulled it down the ramp to the little shingle of beach. The fishing trips had been one of the best parts of his childhood with Uncle Will and Aunt Ida. He had a feeling that Bill felt much the same. Uncle Bill was ordinarily the most taciturn of men, but once he had the boat positioned to his liking, some 60 or 70 yards offshore, lines set, bobbers floating in the water, he could crack a beer for himself and one for Hal, who rarely drank more than half of one can Uncle Will would allow. Always with the ritual admonition of Uncle Will that Aunt Ida must never be told because she'd shoot me for a stranger if she knew I was giving you boys beer, don't you know? And the wax expansive. He would tell stories, answer questions, rebate Hal's hook when it needed rebating, and the boat would drift where the wind and the mild current wanted it to be. How come you never go right out to the middle, Uncle Will? Hal had asked him once. Look overside there, Will had answered. Hal did. He saw the blue water and his fish line going down into black. You're looking into the deepest part of Crystal Lake, Uncle Will said, crunching his empty beer can in one hand and selecting a fresh one with the other. 100 feet, if she's an inch. Amos Culligan's old Studebaker is down there somewhere. Damn fool took it out on the lake one early December before the ice was made. Lucky to get out alive he was. They'll never get the Stude out, nor see it until Judgment Trump blows. Lake's one deep son of a whore right here. It is. Big ones are right here, Hal. No one needs to go out further. Let's see how your worm hooks. Reel that son of a whore right in. Hal did, and while Uncle Will made a fresh crawler for the old Crisco tin. And while Uncle Will put a fresh crawler from the old crystal tin that served as his bait box on his hook, he stared into the water fascinated, trying to see Amos Culligan's old Studebaker, all rust and waterweed drifting out of the open driver's side window, through which Amos had escaped at the absolute last moment. Waterweed festooning the steering wheel like a rotting necklace. Waterweed dangling from the rear view mirror, drifting back and forth in the currents like some strange rosary. But he could see only blue shading and black. And there was the shape of Uncle Will's nightcrawler, the hook hidden inside its knots, hung up there in the middle of things, its own sun-shafted version of reality. Hal had a brief, dizzying vision of being suspended over the mighty gulf, and he had closed his eyes for a moment until the vertigo passed. That day, he seemed to recollect he had drunk his entire can of beer. The deepest part of Crystal Lake, 100 feet if she's an inch. Hal paused a moment, panting, and looked up at Petey, still watching anxiously. You want some help, Daddy? In a minute. He had his breath again, and now he pulled the rowboat across the narrow strip of sand to the water, leaving a groove. The paint had peeled, but the boat had been kept under the cover, and it looked sound. When he and Uncle Will went out, Uncle Will would pull the boat down the ramp, and when the bow was afloat, he would clamber in, grab an oar to push with, and say, Push me off, Hal. This is where you earn your trust. Hand that bag in, Petey, and then give me a push, he said. And smiling a little, he added, This is where you earn your trust. Petey didn't smile back. Am I coming, Daddy? No, not this time. Another time I'll take you out fishing, but not this time. Petey hesitated. The wind trembled his brown hair, and a few yellow leaves, crisp and dry, wheeled past his shoulders and landed at the edge of the water, bobbing like boats themselves. You should have stuffed him, he said low. What? But he thought he understood what Petey had meant. Put cotton over the cymbals, taped it on, so it couldn't make that noise. Hal suddenly remembered Daisy coming toward him, not walking but lurching, and how, quite suddenly, blood had burst from both of Daisy's eyes in a flood that soaked her rough and pattered down on the floor of the barn. How she had collapsed on her forepaws, and on the still rainy spring air of the day, he had heard the sound, not muffled, but curiously clear, coming from the attic of the house, 50 feet away. Jang, 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 jang. He had begun to scream hysterically, dropping the armload of wood he had been getting for the fire. He ran for the kitchen to get Uncle Will, who was eating scrambled eggs and toast, his suspenders not even up over his shoulders yet. She was an old dog, Hal, Uncle Will had said, his face haggard and unhappy. He looked old himself. She was 12, and that's old for a dog. You mustn't take on now. Old Daisy wouldn't like that. Old, the vet had echoed. And she had looked troubled all the same. Because dogs don't die of explosive brain hemorrhages, even at 12. Like as if someone had struck a firecracker in her head. Hal overheard the vet saying to Uncle Will, as Uncle Will dug a hole in the back of the barn, not far from the place where he had buried Daisy's mother in 1950. I never seen the beat of it, Will. And later, terrified, almost out of his mind, but unable to help himself, Hal had crept up to the attic. Hello, Hal. How are you doing? The monkey grinned from its shadowy corner. The cymbals were poised a foot or so apart. The sofa cushion Hal had stood on end between them was now all the way across the attic. Some force, had thrown it hard enough to split its cover, and stuffing foamed out of it. Don't worry about Daisy, the monkey whispered inside his head, its glassy hazel eyes fixed on Hal. Shelburne's wide blue ones. Don't worry about Daisy. She was old. Hal, even the vet said so. And by the way, did you see the blood coming out of her eyes, Hal? Wind me up, Hal. Wind me up. Let's play. And who's dead, Hal? Is it you? And when he came back to himself, he had been crawling toward the monkey as if hypnotized. One hand had been outstretched to grasp the key. He scrambled backward then and almost fell down the attic stairs in his haste, Probably would have if the stairwell hadn't been so narrow. A little whining noise had been coming from his throat. Now he sat in the boat, looking at Petey. Muffling the cymbals doesn't work, he said. I tried it once. Petey cast a nervous glance at the flight bag. What happened, Daddy? Nothing I want to talk about now, Hal said, and nothing you want to hear about. Come on, give me a push. Petey bent to it, and the stern of the boat grated along the sand. Hal dug in with an oar, and suddenly the feeling of being tied to the earth was gone, and the boat was moving lightly. Its own thing again after years in the dark boathouse, rocking on the light waves. Hal unshipped the other oar and clicked the oar locks shut. Be careful, Daddy, Petey said. This won't take long, Hal promised. But he looked at the flight bag and wondered. He began to row, bending to the work. His old familiar ache in the small of his back and between his shoulder blades began. The shore receded. Petey was magically 8 again, 6, a 4-year-old standing at the edge of the water. He shaded his eyes with one infant hand. Hal glanced casually at the shore, but would not allow himself to actually study it. It had been nearly 15 years, and if he studied the shoreline carefully, he would see the changes rather than the similarities and become lost. The sun beat on his neck and began to sweat. He looked at the flight bag, and for a moment he lost the bend and pull rhythm. The flight bag seemed to be bulging. He began to row faster. The wind gusted, drying the sweat and cooling the skin. The boat rose, and the bow slipped water to either side when it came down. Hadn't the wind freshened just in a minute or so? Last minute or so. And was Petey calling something? Yes. Hal couldn't make out what it was over the wind. It doesn't matter. It didn't matter. Getting rid of the monkey for another 20 years, or maybe, please God, forever. Forever. That was what happened, what mattered. The boat reared and came down. He glanced left and saw baby whitecaps. He looked shoreward again and saw Hunter's Point and a collapsed wreck that must have been the Burden's boathouse when he and Bill were kids. Almost there then, almost over the spot where Amos Colligan's is the word, where Amos Colligan's famous Studebaker had plunged through the ice one long ago December, almost over the deepest part of the lake. Petey was screaming something, screaming and pointing. Hal still couldn't hear. The rowboat rocked and rolled, flattening off clouds of thin spray on either side of the peeling bow. Oy. A tiny rainbow glowed and one was pulled apart. Sun and shadow raced across the lake in shudders, and the waves were not mild now. The whitecaps had grown up. His sweat had dried to goose flesh, and spray had soaked the back of his jacket. He rose grimly, eyes alternating between the shore and the flight bag. The boat rose again, this time so high that for a moment he left oar pod at air inside the water. Oh, the left oar pod at air instead of the water. That's actually kind of funny. How did he not realize, right? Petey was pointing at the sky, his scream now only a faint, bright runner of sound. He looked over his shoulder. The lake was a frenzy of waves. It had gone a deadly dark shade of blue, sewn with white seams. The shadow raced across the water toward the boat, and something in its shape was familiar. So terribly familiar that Hal looked up and then screamed. The scream was there, struggling in his tight throat. The sun was behind the cloud, turning it into a hunched, working shape with 2 gold-edged crescents held apart. Two holes were torn in one end of the cloud, and sunshine poured through the two shafts. As the cloud crossed over the boat, the monkey cymbals, barely muffled by the flight bag, began to beat. Jang, 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 jang. It's you, Hal. It's finally you. You're over the deepest part of the lake now, and it's your turn. Your turn. Your turn. Hey, babe, what's up? Nothing. Why? Yeah, I can do that. I can do that. What time is your lunch? Oh, because I have like 4 pages to read. Would that be okay? And then I'll come over? Okay. All right. I'll talk to you soon. All right. Love you. Bye. Yep. Even when I'm reading, I will answer my phone for my husband. So it's going to be in there somewhere. Holy cow. Her hair's down to like here. I'm waiting for my hair to get that long. But she reminds me of Morticia with auburn hair. My daughter does. All right, so we took a little bit of a couple seconds there. My husband needs lunch, so I'm going to read and then we're going to go get lunch. Anybody else thinking of eating? Eating sounds good right about now. I had a sandwich for breakfast. What did you guys have? Well, hopefully you had breakfast. It is 12:12 here in the afternoon. So hopefully you guys have had breakfast and getting ready to go for some lunch. If not a late breakfast, then a later lunch. But you always got to remember to eat. Even if it's like me and usually just coffee or tea. Yeah, something. Anyway, what do we think is going to happen? Do we have any ideas? So, if we check something real quick. If we have some guesses, throw them down in the comments. And yes, this goes to YouTube after, so you can even go over there and decide while you're watching there, you can decide on what's going to happen there too. So don't worry about missing me reading here. You can always watch me over there. It's the same thing, the Reader's Nook. And I do believe on my homepage I have a link to it, so I will double check that. All right. So, it's finally you. You're over the deepest part of the lake now, and it's your turn. Your turn. Your turn. All the necessary shoreline elements had clicked into their places. The rotting bones of Amos Culligan's Studebaker lay somewhere below. This is where the big ones were. This was the place. Hal shipped the oars to the locks in one quick jerk, leaned forward, unmindful of the wildly rocking boat, and snatched the flight bag. The cymbals made their wild pagan music. The bag's sides bellowed, as if with tenebrous respiration. Right here? You son of a whore, Hal screamed. Right here! He threw the bag over the side. It sank fast. For a moment he could see it going down, sides moving, and for that endless moment, he could still hear the cymbals beating. And for a moment, the black waters seemed to clear, and he could see down into the terrible gulf of waters to where the big ones lay. There was Amos Culligan's Studebaker, and Hal's mother behind its slimy wheel, a grinning skeleton with a lake bass staring coldly from one fleshless eye socket. Uncle Will... Why am I echoing now? That is so weird. I don't know. I don't know. That's strange. Well, we're gonna keep going. I lost my place. A grinning skeleton with a lake bass staring coldly from one fleshless eye socket. Uncle Will and Aunt Ida lolled behind her, and Aunt Ida's gray hair trailed upward as the bag fell, turning over and over, a few silver bubbles trailing up. Jang, 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 jang. Hal slammed the oars back into the water, scraping blood from his knuckles. And oh God, the back of Amos Culligan's Studebaker had been full of dead children. Charlie Silverman, Jack McCabe, and began to bring the boat about. There was a dry pistol shot crack between his feet. And suddenly, the clear water was welling up between his two boards. The boat was old. The wood had shrunk a bit, no doubt. It was just a small leak, but it hadn't been there when he rowed out. He would have sworn to it. The shore and lake changed places in his view. Petey was at his back now. Overhead, that awful simian cloud was breaking up. Hal began to row. 20 seconds was enough to convince him he was rowing for his life. He was only a so-so swimmer, and even a great one would have been put to the test in this suddenly angry water. Two more boards suddenly shrank apart with a pistol shot sound. More water poured into the boat, dousing his shoes. Why is this echoing? Hey y'all, is this echoing for you? Please let me know. If it is, I'll redo this. There was a tiny metallic snapping sounds. There were. That he realized were nails breaking. One of the oar locks snapped and flew off into the water. Would the swivel itself go next? The wind now came from his back, as if trying to slow him down, or even drive him into the middle of the lake. He was terrified. But he felt a crazy kind of exhilaration through the terror. The monkey was gone for good this time. He knew it somehow. Whatever happened to him, the monkey would not be back to draw a shadow over Dennis's life or Petey's. The monkey was gone, perhaps resting on the roof or the hood of Amos Culligan's Studebaker at the bottom of Crystal Lake. Gone for good. He rowed, bending forward and rocking back. That cracking, crimping sound came again, and now the rusty Crisco can that had been lying in the bow of the boat was floating in 3 inches of water. Spray blew in Hal's face. There was a louder snapping sound, and the boat seat fell in 2 pieces and floated next to the bait box. A board tore off the left side of the boat, and then another, this one at the waterline, tore off at the right. Hal rowed, breath rasped in his mouth, hot and dry, and then his throat swelled with the coppery taste of exhaustion. His sweaty hair flew. Now the crack zipped directly up the bottom of the rowboat, zigzagged between his feet, and ran up to the bow. Water gushed in. He was in the water up to his ankles, then to the swell of calf. He rowed, but the boat's shoreward movement was sluggy now. He didn't dare look behind him to see how close he was getting. Yes.
So what we could do is get my allergy shots and then go pick up Dad.
Well, or we could get your allergy shots when I go get your dad lunch here in a few minutes. Yeah.
They're closed until 1.
Yeah. I got a few minutes before I'm done. So we'll be all right.
Also, I've realized that the only times I'm sick are when I miss my allergy shots.
Yep. That's why I took the van today.
Yeah, because I had to look back on my schedule to see what date, when last time.
2 weeks.
Huh?
2 weeks.
What do you mean?
It's been 2 weeks since you got your allergy shots.
Are you recording something?
Yes, I'm reading.
Oh, I didn't know.
I don't know why it's echoing. It just suddenly started echoing. Yeah, I have no idea. I can't do anything about it. I mean, I'm trying. But I'm going to look at this and see. And if I'm echoing, I'm going to stop it where it started echoing and then read again. He didn't dare look behind him to see how close he was getting. Another board tore loose. The crack running up the center of the boat grew branches like a tree. Water flooded in. Hal began to make the oars sprint, breathing in great, failing gasps. He pulled once, twice, and on the third pull, both oar swivels snapped off. He lost one oar, held on to the other. He rose to his feet and began to flail at the water with it. The boat rocked and almost capsized and spilled him back onto his seat with a thump. Moments later, more boards tore loose. The seat collapsed, and he was laying in the water which filled the bottom of the boat, astonished at its coldness. He tried to get on his knees, desperately thinking, Petey must not see this. Must not see his father drown right in front of his eyes. You're gonna swim. Dog paddle if you have to. But do something. There was another splintering crack, almost a crash. And he was in the water, swimming for the shore as he never had swum in his life. And the shore was amazingly close. A minute later, he was standing waist deep in water, not 5 yards from the beach. Petey splashed toward him, arms out, screaming and crying, laughing. Hal started toward him and floundered. Petey, chest deep, floundered. They caught each other. Hal breathing in great winded gasps. Nevertheless, hoisted the boy into his arms and carried him up to the beach, where both of them sprawled, panting. Daddy, is it gone? That nasty bad monkey? Yes, I think it's gone. For good this time. The boat fell apart. It just fell apart around you. Hal looked at the boards floating loose in the water 40 feet out. They bore no resemblance to the tight, handsome rowboat he had pulled out of the boathouse. It's all right now, Hal said, leaning back on his elbows. He shut his eyes and let the sun warm his face. Did you see the cloud? Petey whispered. Yes, but I don't see it now. Do you? They looked up at the sky. There were scattered white puffs here and there, but no large, dark cloud. It was gone, as he had said. Hal pulled Petey to his feet. There'll be towels up at the house. Come on. And he paused, looking at his son. You were crazy running out there like that. Petey looked at him sullenly. You were brave, Daddy. Was I? The thought of bravery had never crossed his mind. Only his fear. The fear had been too big to see anything else. If anything else had indeed been there. Come on, Pete. What are we going to tell Mom? He smiled. I don't know, big guy. We'll think of something. He paused a moment longer, looking at the boards floating on the water. The lake was all calm again, sparkling with small wavelets. Suddenly Hal thought of summer. People he didn't even know. A man and his son, perhaps, fishing for the big one. I've got something, Dad, the boy screams. Well, reel it up and let's see, Father says. And coming up from the depths, weeds dragging from its cymbals, grinning its terrible, welcoming grin, the monkey. He shuddered. But those who Those were only things that might be. Come on, he said to Petey again, and they walked up the path through the flaming October woods toward the home place. The Monkey, from the Bridgeton News, October 24th, 1980. Mystery of the Dead Fish by Betsy Moriarty. Hundreds of dead fish were found floating belly up on Crystal Lake in the neighboring township of Casco late last week. The largest numbers appeared to have died in the vicinity of Hunters Point. Although the lake's currents make this a bit difficult to determine, the dead fish included all types commonly found in these waters: bluegills, pickerel, sunnies, carp, hornpout, brown and rainbow trout, even one landlocked salmon. Fish and game authorities say they are mystified. Imagine a monkey like clashing its cymbals and killing people. That's some scary stuff right there. All right, guys, I am going to check this video, and if it starts echoing, it's going to cut off, and then it will be starting up. I'm not sure why it's echoing, so I will check that out, and I will see you guys soon. All right? Y'all have a good day. Hopefully, I can read to y'all tonight. All right. Love y'all.